Good morning, everybody. Morning. Wake up, everybody, I'm telling you. I know most of you probably tried to plan your spring schedules without having an 8 a.m. Friday class. So I can feel for you right now that if you were up this early and you didn't plan on it, thankfully it's only once a semester or once a year. I'm James Padilla, the Dean of the School of Business. Thank you all for being here. In order to start our 4th Annual Summit to Success, I would like to introduce President Marion.
Good morning, and thank you for being part of this year's Summit to Success. We have an outstanding School of Business, as all of you know, an outstanding group of students that go on to success in their careers and in life. And we are very pleased to have with us today, in addition to all of our students, obviously our outstanding faculty. They make the School of Business what it is, which is one of the top schools of businesses in the, I was going to say the country, but even in the world in some ways. I know our MBA program in Romania is typically rated the top MBA program in that country, and of course we offer our MBA in Taiwan, and we're looking at some other places. So we have an international reach, and I think our reputation continues to grow thanks to our outstanding faculty. I also especially want to thank the alumni and other business leaders who are with us today. I think one of the benefits of coming to Tiffin University is frequently our students have a chance to interact with people that are in the real world. Many of our faculty members have worked in business or criminal justice or some of the other areas that we offer here. And we have advisory councils that include people that are in the field, because it's very important that we keep up to date on the changing needs of the employers. And I assume most of you students would like to be employed at some point. So things change, and being able to reach out to alums and other people that are in the world of business to share their expertise and their perceptions with our faculty members, so we can continue to tweak the curriculum to be appropriate, and to share their experiences with you as students as you prepare for life in the real world. So thanks for being here this morning. Thanks to our panelists and the others for helping us out, and hope today goes well.
Continuing with the theme of thanking people, today would not have been possible without the hard work of some very important people and without the collaboration of many of our colleagues in the School of Business. But I definitely want to point out some people that made today successful and possible. Dr. Kelly McGilvery in the back, thank you for all your hard work. Dr. Danielle Foster for setting the bar in previous years. Dr. Lillian Schumacher for the idea for creating much of what we were doing and involving our business club in these efforts as well also. I know she's not here this morning, but I definitely wanted to recognize her as well too. And then of course, Lori Distel, who I think is still outside, along with Haley Hill, our student assistant. Everything that they do to make sure this day goes out smoothly for us is definitely something they all need to be recognized for. So thank you all for your efforts. Last but not least, the support that comes in from many of our sponsors obviously makes today possible. None of that would have happened without the hard work of our development office. Ron Schumacher, thank you and your staff for everything that they have done as well too to help us in this day. Without any further delay, I would like to introduce our MC moderator for today with our panelist group. Jason Griffin is the Director of Communications and Marketing, and Jason will be leading our panelist discussion. Jason.
All right. First of all, somebody's got to keep an eye on the time, because we want to make sure we get you out of here at 9:15. You've got a busy day, other things to do. So somebody in the front row here, the second row, because nobody ever sits in the front row, right? In the second row, just keep an eye on the time, because we want to make sure we allow time for questions as well. We've got some questions that we want to ask our panelists, but we also want questions from you guys, so we want to make sure we have time for that. First of all, let me introduce our fine panelists that are up here. and then I'm going to give them about 60 seconds to kind of talk about what they do for their particular company as well. But first, let me introduce our panelists. First off, we've got the Executive Director of the Seneca County Regional Planning Commission, Roxy Ann Burris. The Director of Global Internal Audit at Owens, Illinois, Chris Schilling. She is the Senior Associate Commissioner of the Horizon League, Alfreda Goff. And the Deputy Assistant Program Manager for the U.S. Navy, Rylin Stoner. Okay, so first of all, how many of you in the audience right now are students at Tiffin University? Show of hands. I would imagine most. Okay, so what we're here to do is obviously give you some advice, as Dr. Marion said, on the quote-unquote real world, right? You all want jobs when you're done, I would imagine. And I would imagine that many of you, when you're successful in your careers, are going to be up here, okay, to teaching, giving advice on students that are maybe in elementary school right now. To imagine a second grader right now is going to be sitting in your seat someday, and you're going to be giving the advice. So that's kind of what the goal is today, is for these fine panelists to give us some advice and give you guys some advice on how they got to where they are. Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to throw out a question. I'm going to let our panelists kind of answer each one, okay? And then we're going to give you guys some time to ask your own questions. Let's start first with each panelist, maybe 60 seconds or so. Give us a little bit more on what you do. Let's start over here with Rylin.
All right. I am a program manager for the U.S. Navy. I work on the George Washington, which is an aircraft carrier, and so I manage the engineering, the contract, the business side of everything, the budget, and ensure that our aircraft carriers are kept maintained for the fleet and protect the country.
Good morning. I am involved in college athletics at the conference level. I've been doing it for 40 years. I know I just look like I'm 35, but I've been a coach, a teacher, an administrator, and several levels athletics director, but always involved in college sports in some manner. Currently run championships for the conference. We have 19 conference championships that allow us entry into the NCAA tournaments.
As Jason mentioned, my name is Chris Schilling. I'm the Director of Global Audit at Owens, Illinois. We are the world's leading producer of glass packaging, so food, beer, wine, spirits, so the bottles you drink from. We produce most of those. I've been in this role for about a year now, so March 1st, 1 year in the director role. Prior to that, I served in different capacities at OI. And then prior to that, 12 to 13 years in public accounting with Ernst & Young. So real quick, with a show of hands, who are seniors? And then juniors? Sophomores? And then freshmen? Good. So it's a good mix, and hopefully today, with some of the information experiences we've had, we'll be able to provide you some insight as you work towards moving on after college. So thank you.
Thank you. My name is Roxy Ann Burris, and my current position and role here in Seneca County is as the Executive Director for the Seneca County Regional Planning Commission. What we do, basically, a lot of folks ask, well, what do you really do? So we are responsible for, my office is responsible for managing and creating and implementing the land use planning and focus for the county, regional county. That's our main goal. We are incorporated in our Ohio Revised Code as a task that should do that. I've been in the planning area field for over 30 years and have a lot of experience in working with plans and doing economic development and planning, working with zoning. One of my tasks also has been to teach at Ohio State University. I got my master's degree a while back in city and regional planning, and so I do still have that relationship with Ohio State, and actually taught classes, undergraduate classes, for the rising seniors on how to find jobs actually in the planning field. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for asking me. Thank you.
All right, so now you know our panelists. Hello, hello. There we go. All right, so now you know our panelists a little bit better. Now we're going to ask them some questions and give you guys some advice on how they got to where they are. Let's start off with leadership. Okay, you hear the word leadership all the time, but what does it really mean? If one of you guys can start off with describing how you, in your jobs, in your roles, show leadership. Okay, let's start with that question. Who would like to tackle that first? How do you show leadership in your current role? Okay, Alfreda Goff.
I am responsible for making sure that our staff is prepared to do their respective jobs, whether it be in communications, whether it be in compliance, whether it be in the financial area. As you know, college sports has become a big business, so we do have to manage our money properly. But one of the things I try to do as the leader, and other than the commissioner, the senior most individual experience-wise, is to make sure that we have good communications among each other. We work as a team, and if any of you are student athletes or you work in any kind of program where you have to be part of a team, it's important that the leader communicates thoroughly, completely, and openly with everyone so that you know what your responsibilities are, what your roles are, and what are the expected outcomes. So that's sort of my leadership style, is communicating with the people that are on my team.
Go ahead, Roxanne.
Okay. I've been in leadership for a little while, a couple years, and have been in different capacities, because you can be in different capacities as a manager and as a leader. In my current capacity, I have a small office, and my role is actually to establish the outcomes, the products that come out of the office. So I have to take the initiative to get that done as a leader. I have the responsibility. I have a board that I'm responsible for, but I need to take the initiative to get those products done. So as a leader, that takes that task. And I've also been in a role where I've had to manage a number of staff. Had a division in the department where I had over 100 staff, which involves other types of leadership and management skills that you need to do that. So you have to know what kind of position you're in and how to administer the leadership role that you're going to be in, which is one thing you'll probably learn later on.
Chris?
And I would echo the communication aspect. So with my role, I see two avenues of leadership. So leading our internal audit function, we're a global function. 27 employees around the world roll up into the audit. So the communication is very important. Also, I would say leading by example. So in terms of the work ethic, fostering the teamwork, setting the example at my level, being very open and engaging to the team. So taking feedback, I'm just not dictating what's being done, getting feedback from my direct reports and trying to develop the plan around that. And there was one other item I hit on, the communication, but as an internal audit function, I think we have to lead by example for the rest of the organization. So if we're going out, we're performing audits, we're identifying areas of opportunity for improvement, and maybe someone isn't doing the right thing. I think about time and expense auditing. It's not a very favorite thing that our team does, but reviewing time and expense reports, we need to set the example by doing the right thing if we're judging others. So I would go back to lead by example.
Excellent. Rylan, do you want to add anything else?
I have a 30-minute speech prepared.
Perfect. We've got plenty of time. Go ahead, 30 minutes.
A big key takeaway that I mentioned last night is certainly to seek to understand before being understood, especially at different levels in your leadership. You'll have to change your leadership style. Some of the skills that you learn, you will maintain, but you'll have to drop some of your tools that you learn and pick up new ones. So make sure you understand what, through communication, what your subordinates think, and as well as what your superiors think and your supervisors think, so that you can understand what is expected of you, and understanding those expectations and applying them and earning the trust of those around you will make you a lot better leader.
Excellent. All right. So obviously, Alfreda already mentioned she's, how old did you say you were, 25, 23? Okay. So this is probably her first job, right? But no, honestly, tell us a little bit about, tell our audience a little bit about your first job, okay? Your first job, you obviously have become very successful in your careers, but tell us your first job out of college, what that was, because we all know with that first job, we all want to make, 6 figures and have a fantastic job as soon as we're 23 years old, right? And here we go, and we work there for 30 years and retire. Doesn't work that way, right? So tell us about your first jobs.
By trade, I'm a teacher. I went to school, got a master's and an undergrad in education. I thought that I would have the perfect career, teach for 25 years, retire from that, because in the school system of Pennsylvania, you can retire after 25 years of service. So I figured 46, I could start a second career. Great plan, right? Well, I lasted 10 years in teaching, but I enjoyed it because I was very passionate about it. And really took the job also because, wow, I hit the big payday. My first pay, or my first contract was $5,000 a year. And I'm looking, and you're like, are you kidding me right now? You know, but seriously. And my first coaching job at the collegiate level was $2,000 a year. So I'm glad to say we've come a long way. I do make very good money now, but it wasn't for the money that I took the job. So I'm saying to you, your first job is not going to give you six figures. It's probably going to keep you, you know, you're in business, school of business, and some of you will leave with an MBA and you'll get a little more money than $5,000 a year. But it won't be the ultimate salary that you will be seeking out. So please take your first job as a learning opportunity, a teachable moment, because it won't be the last job that you have in whatever career you end up choosing.
Who else would like to describe their first job? Roxanne?
Sure. My story is very similar. I actually got my undergrad from UCLA, and it was in sociology, so obviously that's not planning. And I got my first job after that. I felt like, you know, I didn't want to go and move on and get my master's right away, so I thought, well, I need to work. So I went and I got a job as a counselor. And of course I was paying, the pay was probably less than $20,000 a year, which is not a whole lot of money, of course. But I think the takeaway was, you know, and I learned from that job that that was something I did not want to do the rest of my life, of course. That was one of the things that I was, you know, that I learned from that. But I learned some good work skills, and I learned what else was out there. That gave me an opportunity to take that job and then give me time to look around to see what is it that I really want to do. Where is my passion? What can I take away from this job? It was a good first job, but certainly that your first job is going to be kind of your springboard to your next job and your next job and your next job. And then that, once I worked that position, of course, that led me back to college to get my master's degree in city and regional planning, which is where my passion is. And from that point, you know, then I, you know, realized a whole lot of success and money and all of that came with that. But I had to experience that first job first in order to get there.
Well, my story is slightly different. So my undergraduate is in aerospace engineering, and the first job I took was as a nuclear engineer for the Navy out in Seattle, working as a nuclear shift test engineer. I can't say I made six figures on my first job. Within 3 years, I hit the six-figure mark, and I know that's not common and typical, but this is a panel, and they want honesty, so it can be done. But with that came working 60, 70 hours a week. I mean, I worked a lot. So as I moved through my career, you know, my goal was, how can I keep the same paycheck and not work so many hours? How can I advance and have a life, you know, that isn't only work? So, you know, the first job is not where, it was where I wanted to be at the time, but I needed, you know, as time goes on, I use that as a springboard to go into my next positions and finally, I attempt to have a life. I don't work those hours, but instead I go to school full-time and work full-time, so it's never ending.
Chris?
So I was an accounting major, and the school I went to, the professor really pushed the public accounting realm. So I put all my eggs in one basket and looked at public accounting. I had one interview, or two interviews with the same company. It started with Ernst & Young. I had 2 internships on the auditing side, started full-time in auditing. As soon as I had the opportunity to get out of auditing, I did. So I was in audit for about 6 months, always had an interest in tax, I went to the tax side. But even in that short period of time, you know, some of the organizational skills, the networking skills, communication with clients, you know, I look back on that fondly, and you know, how many ever years later now I'm back in auditing, so I came full circle. But I have a different appreciation for it now. And on the internal auditing side, you can do some additional things that you may not be doing in public accounting. So.
And we're going to allow for some questions here in a second. Just to put a little more perspective into the first job, quick story. So I was talking to Chris before we started. My first job offer, I went to school at Miami University, broadcast journalism degree, wanted to be a sports broadcaster. And my first job offer was on the phone from a minor league hockey team in Lafayette, Louisiana for $12,000 a year and no benefits. And I said, no thank you, I'm going to pass on that. I was living in Chicago at the time with my sister, rent-free, living across the street from Wrigley Field, going to Cubs games every day. I was living the life, right? But I had no money. So I get that offer, I said, no thanks. A week later, I got offered a job at a radio station in Chicago as a producer for $20,000. You would have thought that I hit the jackpot. So you put it all into perspective. I turned down 12, got 20, I thought I was a millionaire. Let's pause for 1 second. I have some other questions, but we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to allow our students and guests to ask some questions. We've got about 15 minutes or so left in this panel discussion. Raise a hand who has a question for our panelists, and if you do have a question, please stand up and give our panelists an opportunity to answer.
I have a question. I would like to know how you guys got ahead of Kevin's notes, got ahead of the game, and put yourself out there. What is the different things that you guys did for that?
Who would like to tackle that? How did you get ahead of the game? How did you get to where you are? Chris, go ahead.
So a couple characteristics I would say, and not just me, but other people that I've seen successful. So I would say attitude is one of the key items. So willing to do whatever job's given to you. Definitely technical competence comes into play. So having the right attitude is the next step. Having the technical competence. I would also say networking. So with my job at Ernst & Young, I think I had the grades to get in, but at the time I was coaching at a high school, and the athletic director actually played high school basketball with one of the partners at Ernst & Young and made a call for me. So I would like to think I got the opportunity to go to EY based on my merits, but having networking and people looking out for you as well. But I think the hard work and the attitude builds those relationships so people want to vouch for you and provide your name for opportunities.
Roxanne?
I think my process has been, I've always wanted to kind of climb the ladder. I knew that starting out. And so I almost planned for it. And I made sure that I was always prepared for the next level, even over-prepared sometimes. But and I wanted to, take it step by step. Of course, I wasn't trying to jump over, a number of levels. I was prepared to take the steps that I needed to get to where I wanted to go. But first, establishing the goals, having the desire to even do it, and then preparing yourself to get there. You know what those requirements are. I knew what those requirements were, so I would make sure I had those requirements plus. Because I didn't want them, I wanted them to think about not hiring me for that position, and I didn't want the reason to be because she wasn't qualified. So that was my path, and that's kind of what led me there.
Elfrida?
I would say I did all of those things, and I would add one other thing is be passionate about what you do. People want people to be a part of their team when you are passionate about doing something. And so I've always made sure that no matter what I do, I'm very passionate about it, and it helped me get from being a teacher to where I am today. And I've probably had 4 jobs, but have served in so many different capacities during those 4 jobs. I never, ever, if it meant setting up a gym, I was passionate about doing it the right way. So it's the little things that you do, and being passionate about it in preparation and experience will help you make yourself stand up.
I completely agree with all of the other panel members. Definitely work hard and don't burn bridges. Networking is really important, and know when it is appropriate to burn a bridge and know when you're going to do it. But don't intentionally burn bridges unless you're close to retirement, because once they're burned, you're not going to get them back. And I would also add, continue your education. A lot of leaders have experience in a lot of different areas, so change within your organization. Take lateral moves from one organization to another within your company. Even if it doesn't come with an increase in pay, it comes with an increase in knowledge and an increase in skills. And so as you move up the ladder, you have those skills on your resume to say, I can do all of these things, I've done them, so I will be a good leader and I will be respected.
Excellent. Good question. Good question. And I always say too, I mean, as far as burning bridges and making contacts, you never know. There may be somebody in this room right now that's 20 years younger than I am that's going to hire me someday. I mean, honestly, you always have to remember that, and networking is very important. Who else has a question? Don't be shy. Go ahead.
Is there a common mistake you see college graduates making when they come into their first job or first interview?
A common mistake that potential employees, will make.
So for me, one of the big pet peeves is you go through an interview, good discussion, and then you get to the end, and as an interviewer, you ask, are there any questions? And you hear crickets chirping. And for me, that almost just sets the whole interview aside, because if you come in prepared and you've done your research on the company, you should have a list of questions that you're gonna rattle off. And writing them down and bringing them with you is no problem at all. Generally, we like seeing that. You put in the time beforehand to prepare. So you know, if you're going to a public company with the internet, there's a variety of information you can pull down. 10K reports, annual filings that companies issue. A variety of information in there. You could look at the risks, you could look at the financial numbers, the company strategy. Also, when I was applying for my role 7 years ago at OI, listening to the earnings calls. So usually they're archived. You can go to the website of the company, section for investors, and they have recorded webcasts of the earnings calls that the CEO and CFO present on a quarterly basis. And you can listen to that information and develop questions there. So, you know, I would say prepare, list of questions, bring that in with you, ask your questions, and, you know, you may ask the same questions to multiple interviewers, and that's not a problem. But I think, you know, at the end of the interview, showing that you put your time in, and also if you ask those questions during the interview, you get the interviewer talking, and it takes pressure off you. So people want to talk about the role, what they do, and this and that. You're showing interest, and you get them engaged in the discussion. So really preparation, I think, is one of the key items.
And that's an excellent point. And to give you an example, it continues when you have a job, right? I have 25 questions today. How many have I asked so far? 3? I mean, you got to be prepared. You got to have those questions. Who else would like to tackle that? Mistakes that employees make.
Pet peeve, maybe not so much, but your dress. When you come to interview, I know we're a very casual society, and you don't have to wear suits and ties and dresses, but when you're doing an in-person interview, your attire is very important, because a first impression is what? A lasting impression, and you can't change that. I'll give you an example. A young person came in to interview for an internship. Came in, khakis, didn't have a belt around his waist, had a polo on. Hair was unkempt. It looked like he just literally rolled out of bed. Well, that's great when you're on campus, but not when you're, and this is an internship, not when you're sitting in front of a potential employee. So your attire. You don't have to go out and get an Armani suit. Women, you don't have to go out and get Prada. But, you know, just be neat, clean, and prepared with your appearance.
Go ahead, Roxanne.
I just wanted to add to that. I think those were great comments. And one thing is, and I've learned through working with the students, is sometimes you go into the interview with unrealistic expectations, and you don't really know what the job is about, and it may be more than what you think it is. So be clear, do the research, understand what job you're applying for, and know, you know, what you need to do. Because, you know, sometimes you have your degree, of course, and that's really, really wonderful. You know, and so you think, oh, I can now just, you know, I can plan the world, I can do whatever I want. But there are just basic jobs out there that you're applying for. So knowing what that is it's helpful.
The only other thing I would add is a sense of entitlement. I've noticed younger generations have this sense of entitlement, and that they are above busy work. And know when you go into a job, like you're going to do busy work. Everyone does. You know, with the economy the way it is, you know, we're at less than 1% inflation right now. employment is, and employers are cutting back. There's no more secretaries that are doing everything for you. So understand that every job, doesn't matter what level you are, comes with busy crap work. Everybody will be making copies. So don't have that sense of entitlement that I'm better than that, because even the CEO is probably making copies.
Yeah, it's paying your dues, right? I mean, think about that for a second. If you're in a potential job interview, you've got, let's say that one of these panelists are hiring somebody and they have 5 equally capable people and all the resumes are fantastic. You're probably going to go to that one that, you get that sense that they'll put in their dues, they'll do that busy work and not have that sense of entitlement. Any other questions? We have a few more minutes left, I believe. Any others? I've got plenty, but I'd rather hear from you guys. No? All right. We've got a few more minutes. I'm going to ask the panelists another question here. Okay, so what is the, 2 words. I just want to make this one short and sweet. 2 words, I'll give you 3. 3 words to describe a good leader. We talked about leadership, that was the first question, but I want you guys to think about that for a second. Give me 2 or 3 words that these folks can take away that would be a good leader. Who would like to start?
Well, I'll give you 1 word: trust. A good leader must be trusted by both above and below.
Trust. Good.
Integrity, sense of values, and passion.
Great.
I would say direct, open, and then caring.
Okay.
I think a good leader needs to be fair. Understand that you work with a number of different personalities and a number of different people. Diversity is probably there, so you have to administer in an equitable way.
Okay, excellent. We obviously the job that you guys have right now, you've had several different jobs. The workforce has changed a little bit from 20 years ago, 10 years ago, what have you. Talk about that a little bit, the change in the atmosphere of where you work, okay? Compared to that first job to where you are now, how have things changed as far as the workforce is concerned?
I'd like to start because I've probably been working longer than everybody else up here. Besides the monetary rewards, technology. That has been the biggest change, I think, that has impacted everyone regardless of what field they're in. So be up to date, but I wouldn't have to say that to young people because that's the world you grew up in. But as you continue, technology will change, make your job either more difficult or easier or moderately change it. The technology for me is the biggest change
Excellent.
in my career.
Chris?
I guess building on the technology piece, as a result of technology, impact on communications. So with texting and emails, nothing can beat just picking up the phone or walking down a couple offices and speaking to somebody live. What you don't get in emails is, facial expressions, body language, what's the intent. So you can read into an email and stress about it when it's really not that big of a deal. So don't hesitate to pick up the phone, walk down the hall, speak to the person live, and have that interaction as opposed to just texting back and forth.
It's an excellent point.
And one more point about the technology, the impacts of the technology too, is the sense of urgency, the sense of immediateness. Before, you would get a memo or something from someone and then you'd be able to respond to that person in a week or a couple days, and now it's immediate. You get an email and someone may get upset because you didn't respond right away. And you may have a ton of other things that you're doing and didn't really have the opportunity to respond. But trust me, the person who's expecting that response you will hear from. I sent you an email, I didn't hear a response, 2 minutes later, and then, so you have to kind of drop things. It changes kind of the way you do business, especially if you're in a really busy office or getting a ton of emails, and there are offices where a lot of emails come in. So because of that technology, I think now that everyone's expecting that immediate response. So that's a big change I've noticed.
Do you have anything to add, Rylan?
I would say diversity. I know I've been in the workforce for about 15 years. This summer was my 15-year mark, but diversity. You know, there was, as a female in a male-dominated world, there was only 2 of us when I graduated college with engineering degrees. And now, as I advance in my career, I'm seeing a lot more younger women engineers that are coming into the workforce. And we actually have a lot of women engineers that are now senior executives in my office. So diversity makes for better leadership and makes for a better organization. So I've seen it grow just in my short time, as I'm sure the rest of the panel can say as well.
All right, I'm looking at the time here, and you guys didn't give me a time limit, by the way. But I've been told to wrap things up. So how about a round of applause for our panel? A lot of good information. A lot of good information. I hope that many of you take some of that information and use it. And again, thanks to our panelists for coming. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
All right, I still get to say good morning again because we're not quite into the afternoon yet, but I'm very happy to see that our attendance is still high. The students are still engaged, and yes, I consider the engagement eating lunch. So I do appreciate you guys coming for lunch and eating. Chair, thank you. I'm happy to introduce our keynote speaker. One of the things that I wanted to highlight is some of our success in past years, along with continuing with that success of identifying people from outside of the Tiffin area to bring in to be a part of this day. As I introduce Terry, I'll give you a little bit of his background and also give you some explanation and some understanding of why he's here related to our theme of inspiring leadership and how we continue that. One of the things that I did want to mention as well as part of the introduction is something that I think all of you as students will eventually learn. You'll learn hopefully in some of your own individual paths towards leadership as well too, but something that we get to take advantage of here absolutely at Tiffin in the way in which we inspire leadership in you. Myself, many people refer to me as being a leader, obviously, as the Dean of the School of Business. I was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time. Quite honestly, that's really how it goes. You know, you take advantage of opportunities as they present themselves, and I was in the right place at the right time. My leadership style is really designed around empowering those around me. And this event is evidence of the people that I have faith in as a leader to do what I believe is going to be right and to do what I think is what's in the best interests of our school, our university, and most importantly, you as students. And you see the evidence of that even happening here on campus. The other aspect of the leadership style that I myself follow has a lot to do with the fact of, working with a small, intimate environment. And being able to have an impact with you as students on a constant daily basis is important to me and obviously important to this institution. Please keep those things in mind as you develop what you're going to become in your future. Keep in mind what makes you happy. Keep in mind what inspires you. Keep in mind where you want to go in terms of your own directions as well too. This day is obviously about you as students. Take advantage of it. When we're done with the keynote speaker, you all have a tremendous opportunity later this afternoon to carve out a piece for yourselves in regards to job opportunities and internship opportunities. Make sure you make a good impression. Make sure you represent this institution and the School of Business and your faculty members in a professional manner. Make sure that you lay the groundwork for yourself to be successful in your future. All right, without further ado, Terry Egger. Terry Egger is the founder and principal of CZ Advisors, a Cleveland-based consulting firm. In August of 2014, Terry became president and CEO of the Cleveland 2016 Host Committee, which is for the Republican National Convention. He's a retired chairman of the Plain Dealer Publishing Company, where he was responsible for the overall policy, operation, and direction of Ohio's largest newspaper. He was previously the president and publisher and CEO of the Plain Dealer. He joined that newspaper in 2006. Prior to the Plain Dealer, he was president and publisher of the St. Louis Dispatch. Without further delay, Mr. Terry Egger, our keynote speaker.
Hey, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay in the back? Great. It's wonderful to be on campus. Early in my career, I had an opportunity to teach college for a number of years, and still the greatest joy you can ever have is to be with students, you know, either teaching or coaching, and so it's a thrill to be here, and I look forward to touring the campus and seeing a little bit more of the town. What I thought I'd do, if it's okay with you this morning, is till we get to noon, is talk a little bit first about the Republican National Convention, because it is a unique bit of history that is coming to our region very soon. And it's a great story about how, against great competition, we in Cleveland and the region were able to win this convention. So I'll talk about that for a few minutes. But trying to stay with the theme of the day of leadership, then I'd just like to share a few thoughts about what I've observed in my life in terms of good leaders, bad leaders, and lessons learned, if you will. So, and then at the end, I'll be happy to open up to questions to talk about anything you'd be interested in. So first of all, the Republican National Convention. This is a pretty big deal. In order to be considered for a convention, you have to, as a city, be asked to bid. And so in this particular go-around, Cleveland had determined, and when I say Cleveland, I'm really talking about Northeast Ohio and really, in many parts, all of Ohio. We had decided that we were going to bid, if asked, for either the Republican National Convention or the Democratic National Convention. It just so happens that the RNC, the cycle for that was about 6 months earlier than the DNC. And so 8 cities around the country were invited to bid on that convention. In addition to Cleveland, it was Columbus and Cincinnati, so it was unique to have 3 cities in one state. That was very unique. But then we had Denver, Dallas, Phoenix, Las Vegas, Kansas City. So some pretty formidable opponents, if you will. And that's what they were. It was a very much a competition. Soon it became 6 cities. Then it was 4 cities. It was Denver, who had hosted very successfully President Obama's inaugural convention. Dallas, and we all know how big D is. And Kansas City. And Kansas City was unique in that while not a major sized market like Dallas or Denver, there was a unique characteristic here because Kansas City was the only city left that didn't have an NHL team or an NBA team. Now, why would that be relevant? Because the convention is held in the arena where those teams play, and they wanted to have the convention much earlier than they'd ever done it. They wanted to have it as early as late June, when usually it's late August. And so you ran the risk of having, if you had a hockey team or a basketball team, them being in the finals, and then the arena not being available for the build-out in the convention. So that's why Kansas City had a leg up. So we go through this competition, and it costs a lot of money, and it takes a lot of effort to try to even be in the process. And it came down to Cleveland and Dallas. Cleveland and Dallas. And we all know how that works out, right? Cleveland and Dallas, who wins? And it was just one of the great stories because we had poured our hearts into this. And you have to raise a lot of money, and you have to have a lot of other things going for you. And we knew that we were going to get a call at 11:30 on Tuesday, July 8th. The mayor in his office was going to get a call saying we won it or we didn't. And so at 11:30 the phone rang, and the mayor pushed the speaker button. There were a couple of us sitting around, and the woman who was the head of the site selection said, you know, you all were so hospitable to us, and you kept saying that you wish you could spend more time with us. We hope you're serious because we're coming to Cleveland. And it was just a great moment. At the same time, and she said, you can't say anything yet because we need to call Dallas now. At the same time, Dallas was so convinced they were going to win it that there, instead of a handful of people around the phone waiting, they had all of the media in the room. They had the TV cameras, the reporters from the newspapers, the radio stations, etc., because they knew they were going to win. So anyway, so to win this, it's not like winning a golden lottery ticket where you just got lucky. It means you had to be prepared. And it's a validation that says you are a world-class convention city. Because our obligations as a host committee, and we as a host committee are not political. We have nothing to do with the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. We're all about our community. But this is the only event bigger than this in the world is the Olympics, the Summer Olympics, not the winter, the Summer Olympics. It's the only thing bigger in terms of an event in the world. To put it on scale, the budget for this convention for those few days will be north of $110 million. North of $110 million. In addition to that, when you think about the Super Bowl and how big an event that is, The Super Bowl just issued 5,000 media credentials. So 5,000 professional media came to cover the Super Bowl. There'll be 15,000 media credentials for the Cleveland Convention in 2016. One of our obligations is to build out a 300 or provide a 300,000 square foot state-of-the-art media center to house 15,000 media. So around the world. And it's the second biggest event from a media standpoint. It is the largest data exchange event in the world. And what by that I mean, you guys know it's better than anything. Everybody, as soon as a speaker goes up, the phones go up, right? And that changed very dramatically from just a few years ago. One of the interesting facts from the guys from AT&T, they were telling me about Tampa. Tampa was where the Republican convention was in 2012. In Tampa, they were trying to make sure AT&T built its network out. Verizon would do the same. Everybody wants to make sure that they can handle the capacity because nobody wants to look bad while the world is watching. And so they, at the time, in 2012, they looked at what was the largest data exchange event in the history of the world prior to that, and it was that previous Super Bowl. So in February of 2012, during the Super Bowl, that was the largest data exchange event in the world. And so AT&T built out their capacity to handle 10 times that amount, just to be sure they were ready, even though the convention was only going to be 7 months later. And it almost crashed. That's how exponentially fast the data exchange is going. So again, what we'll have is we'll have 50,000 people come to Cleveland or Northeast Ohio. We'll have the 15,000 media. We have to secure 17,000 hotel rooms and about 70 venues, in addition to raising on our side of the ledger about $65 million. Everybody's very excited about this, but it's a two-edged sword because while that bright light, we'll give it a minute. While that bright light is on us, it's your opportunity to shine, but if you fail to perform, it has other consequences. The other thing that's unique about the convention for our community at this particular time is, remember I said we got that call at 11:30 on July 8th? And people around the country were going, wow, Cleveland won? What's going on? 3 days later, at about the same time, LeBron James announced he was coming back home. And so if you think about people's perception of Cleveland or Northeast Ohio, it's either somewhat on the negative side or they're indifferent to it. Either one of those are not good places to be. So if the pendulum's over here about the perception or the narrative of our community, suddenly within 3 days' time, this curiosity ripple about what is going on in Cleveland went through the whole country, went through the world. And while that curiosity ripple is out there, we now are trying to take maximum advantage of it. Because this isn't about the convention. It's not about a couple of days. It's about the attention it has brought to us to be able to sell and tell a new narrative entirely about our community, to be able to create interest and investment and a long-term play. That's the real payoff of having been given this opportunity, and that's really what we're focused on. And we just think, I mean, I've lived all over Jim didn't get into it, but I've lived in Illinois, South Dakota, San Diego, Los Angeles, Tucson. I've been thrown out of a lot of cities, a lot of cities. There's no place that we've lived that we've experienced a better quality of life than here in Ohio. And why? Everybody can tick off, well, the amenities, the cost of living, the this, the sports. It's all those are nice, and all those you can check the box. But the number one thing is the quality of the people you interact with every day. As young people, think about this. The things that make you have a good life and a quality of life, there's nothing that determines it more than the people you interact with every day. You know? The people you spend time with at work, at school, at church, at a bar, at a party, wherever it is, and people who genuinely care about you. And in closing on the RNC, with all the factors, having the hotel rooms, having the arena, having the convention center, having the money, having all those things, the people who made the decision, the 30-some people on the site selection committee said, it was the people. It was the people, the quality people that coming up to them on the street saying, we hope you come to Cleveland. You know, that is something you don't find everywhere else in the country. So not only take advantage of it, be one of them. Be one of those people who are always good to other people. You know, it costs you nothing. I've been telling my kids since they could, you know, try to listen. You're in this world to do something for other people. That's why you're here, and that's where you get all your rewards. So when Cleveland was selected, and they said it was really the swing factor was the people, at the end of that, they also said it was never even close with Dallas. It was never even close. And so it was a great validation. So I hope that all of you have an opportunity. You won't get tickets into the arena, I promise you. I probably won't get a ticket into the arena. You may not want to. But be a part of it. Try to get over to the community and see it. There'll be a vibrancy that's going on that actually will be historic, and you're close enough to be right there to be a part of it. Okay? So, if you have questions about that, we'll come back to it later. I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk about probably, outside of my wife and kids and coaching and teaching, my favorite subject, and that's leadership. Since I can remember, I remember being in the second grade and think, whatever, I was a sick little dude, I don't know. But I was thinking about leadership, you know, what's it mean? And if you think about it, we all know who a leader is in terms of the appointed leader. But real leadership is about a shared responsibility. And they're all different styles of leadership. So what I want to share with you in the next few minutes is really about my observations and what I've found to be authentic and work, both for me personally, but also my observations of others that are good leaders. Because you've got the autocratic leaders, you've got the servant leaders, you've got different styles. But for me, what I've observed is the most important thing is think about leadership in terms of a shared responsibility. Not in terms of one person owning it, but one person maybe having and helping create a vision of what success looks like, sharing that, getting input from others, and then bringing everybody along on the journey. An analogy I used to teach at a little college in Los Angeles called Marymount. And Marymount sits up on, there are two Marymounts. There's Loyola Marymount in the Marina del Rey, and then there's Marymount College up in Palos Verdes Peninsula. If anybody knows LA, it's a spectacular place. It sits high up on a cliff, about 1,500 feet up in the air, overlooks the Pacific Ocean, and then out there you see Catalina Island about 26 miles away. So the analogy I'd use about leadership then is, suppose we're all on a ship, and we've all agreed that we're going from LA to Catalina. And while we're on that ship, everybody has different responsibilities and their role on the ship. But at any given time, if we're getting off course, it's incumbent on everybody on the ship to be able to say, hey, we're off course, we need to get here, or hey, we're taking on water. The point being, the shared responsibility to get us from point A to B, from our goal, or from where we are to our goal, is shared by everybody on the ship. And they understand the responsibility and their ability to speak up and contribute to that. And I'll come back to that later, but I think that is a fundamental difference, because it changes the dynamic between I share the leadership of our success versus I am a victim of what somebody else is imposing on me. And if you think about that, those two extremes, I am sharing in the success here in leadership, or I'm a victim of what somebody else is imposing on me. Now, many of you in this room are in the beginning of your careers or will be. Doesn't mean you can't be leaders. As soon as you enter an organization, you can step up and own some of that. But let me go back to what I think are absolute basics. If I look at what I think about DNA of leadership, it starts with the basics of communication. Are there any comm majors in here? Okay. But you all had different communication classes. So, communication is the most basic thing in the world, but I want to break it down for a minute and just pull a couple elements from it. All right? So, we all speak English in this room? Yep. We all understand English when it's spoken to us? Yep. So we all communicate pretty well. Yep. Anyone in here ever been misunderstood? Anyone in here ever misunderstood somebody? Okay? Happens all the time. Why? Because we got this screwed up sense about the center of the universe. Where is the center of the universe? The center of the universe is in our shoes. Wherever our shoes are, if we're standing in them, that is the center of the universe. And it's a natural human nature trait to have an insecurity. And that insecurity, like when you meet somebody and they say, oh, hi, I'm so-and-so and I'm so-and-so, how often do you not hear their name or remember it? you know? Because a lot of times you're thinking about, how do I look? What do they think of me? You know, just in that very brief interaction, using language that you both understand, just in that little snapshot, you can miss something. Because your focus isn't on them or the outside, the focus is internal. Far too often. Far too often. So, oh, by the way, Jim mentioned I retired. I had a 30-year newspaper career. It was fascinating. And I retired last year. And my wife said, look, I don't care what you do, but you know, for better, for worse, but not for lunch, you're not hanging around the house. And the reason I bring that up is this. Well, why does that communication break down? Because ideal communication takes place when you have something in your mind that you want to convey, and you can take it and put it in the recipient's mind and have them interpret it exactly as you'd intended. Okay? That is ideal communication. But because of those insecurities and because of the distractions and because of so many other things, we often miss that simple connection. And it is the fundamental root of leadership. So now back to when my wife was saying, you're not staying home. So A, I can't stay at home. B, you know, I don't have any money coming in. C, my wife loves to spend money, you know. So I had taken up another career in the interim, and that is I was a thief, or I am a thief. But I mean, not like petty stuff. I don't rob, you know, break into cars or steal purses or anything. I'm like on the high end of this, you know. So I focus on, specialize in banks, you know, or savings and loans, you know. But the idea being where there's big cash, you know. And so, and I'm really good at it. That's why I've never been caught. And that's why I'm really not nervous about telling you this, you know, here today, because I'm, you know, not worried I'm going to get busted on this. But as a really good thief, a world-class thief that I am, if I went to bed tomorrow night, and right before we went to bed, my wife started talking about, you know, we haven't been on a vacation in a really long time. I'd like to go somewhere nice. And then just before I fall asleep, she's saying, you know, and I saw 2 dresses that I think I should have. And then I listen to this. Then I wake up in the morning and says, you know, I haven't had a decent piece of jewelry. And I just like, boom, I've had it. That's enough. I can't take it anymore. So I reach over, I grab my mask, I grab my gun, I get in the car, and I drive down the street, and I find a bank, and I just go to that bank, and I rob the bank, come home, get some money just to solve my problem. Would that make me a good thief? A good thief? Yeah. Someone in here, I think, would probably adjust that for me a little bit. If you're a really good thief, what would you do first? Use the language of a thief now. You would do what before you went into that bank and robbed it on knee-jerk reaction? Case the joint. There's a fellow thief right there. You would case the joint, right? And what do you mean by casing a joint? What do you mean by casing a joint? You want to know as much as you possibly can because you have an objective, okay? So you want to know, A, where the security systems are. B, are there security guards? Are they old or are they young? Do they shoot right or left-handed? What day of the week is there the most money there? What are the best exits? You would want to know as much as you possibly could about that situation. Because the more you know about it, it increases dramatically the chances of you being able to bust in there, get your money, and get out and get away. The reason I bring that crazy story up is that's what happens in ideal communication. You need to case the joint on the other side. All value in communication is applied by the receiver of the message. Doesn't matter what the sender's intent is, you know? If I want to give Terry a check for $1 million just because I write a check and on a piece of paper and I write $1 million and I give it to him, he doesn't have $1 million until the bank says he has $1 million. So it doesn't matter what your intent as a communicator is, the value is all applied by the receiver. And why does that and banking and all that have to do with leadership? Because at the core, the DNA of it all is the word empathy. And again, I said there are different styles of leadership. But what I've observed, the best leaders I've ever seen, and what I've tried to emulate in the opportunities I've been given, is to understand the power of the concept of empathy. It's more powerful than love, more powerful than hate. And what it does is it puts you in a position to really understand what's going on. So how does that translate to leadership? Okay. Well, again, I said leadership's a shared responsibility. I said that, you know, people are assigned leadership. I said in order to lead somebody, you have to know where you're going. So that notion of destination and alignment and how important that is, it galvanizes people. I recall when I was about 35 years old or something like that. Anyone ever heard of the name Pulitzer, the Pulitzer Prizes? Okay. I was a relatively young newspaper guy working in Tucson, Arizona, and I got tapped on the shoulder about coming to interview to run the newspaper in St. Louis. I was like, what? You got the wrong guy. I mean, I'm nowhere near prepared for that. Nowhere near. It's a 3 times the size organization, unions from head to toe, a financial disaster, if you will. And I'm thinking, I'm happy in Tucson, my kids are happy, my wife's happy, it's a beautiful, And they said, well, just come and talk to us. So I agreed to go talk to them. And there are little signs in life, just subtle ones, right? So the night before I'm getting on a plane to fly to St. Louis from Tucson, I'm flipping around, put the kids to bed, and I'm flipping around the TV channel. And just flipping, I'd never in my life, I'd never watched the Biography channel. At that time, I'd never seen a show on the Biography channel. So I'm flipping around, and it's like the top of the hour, boom, in the Biography channel, and it says, Pulitzer, a prize-winning story, debuts tonight. And I thought, well, that's a subtle sign, you know. Here I'm going to fly to talk to the Pulitzers tomorrow, and here's their Biography channel thing on there. So end up going, take the job, and I've never been more in over my head in my life, ever. I remember there, my family's still in Tucson, sitting in that room in Joseph Pulitzer IV's office, you know, that was my new office, and thinking, what in the hell have I done here? How am I supposed to behave? Who am I supposed to be to lead this organization I don't have a clue about? And then suddenly there was just like a peace and a calm, and it was like, hey, be authentic. Be who you are. You're either good enough or you're not. But the thing you don't ever want to do is start acting like, now that I have this role, I have to assume a role, that I have to be something different. And I'll come back to that in a minute. But just be authentic. When you're given new responsibilities, do it to the best of your ability. So I started this organization, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on, the lay of the land, a little empathy. So I started having one-on-one conversations with employees at every level. And I had maybe 70, 75 conversations, took notes, meet for about 45 minutes, talk about their careers, talk about their families, talk about where they grew up. I truly wanted to know them. You know, I wasn't trying to pull a game here. I wanted to know who I was working with, because that's, you know, that's life. And from those conversations, I started getting themes. You know, after 70 of them, pulled out 6 themes of things that, because my last question would be, if you owned all of this, if your name was Pulitzer and you owned all of this, what would you be doing differently here? And so everybody had their point of view, trust me. So whether it was the guys working in the press room or the journalists or the salespeople, everybody had an opinion. Out of this opinion, the themes emerged. And so suddenly you got 6 themes, you could do all of these things. But what do you focus on most? Because if you do everything, you may do nothing well. And I was having breakfast on a Sunday reading the paper, trying to figure out what is it that we do next. And on the front page of the paper that day, there was a story. It was a tragic story. McDonnell Douglas was based in St. Louis. They had a test pilot whose plane crashed. And there were 2 diagrams on the page. One showed the actual flight of the crash, and one showed what the flight should have been. And sitting there having coffee was like, boom. That's the problem. He didn't have enough air under him. He tried to do all these maneuvers without having enough air under him. And so that became the priority. You've got to have enough revenue coming in order to take on all these other things you need to do, and it set that prioritization in terms of what our goals should be. So then meeting with the senior team, and they had, you know, on a retreat and all these things, and I said, what, you know, all the things, what should we be doing? Got them all up on the board, and I said, great, after a day and a half, if we were to do all of these things, and I had a little chart, I said our cash flow right now as a company is maybe $9 million, okay? If we do all the things you say we ought to be doing and we do them well, 5 years from now, what should our cash flow be? And you would have thought I asked them to punch their grandmother. I mean, nobody wanted anything to do with that answer. Nobody. Because they had been used to being in a hierarchical, dictatorial kind of leadership structure. They were used to being told, here's what you will do, because then they weren't responsible ultimately for the consequence. So I said, okay, and nobody would say a word. I just wrote $50 million on the board. I said, that should be our goal. 5 years, we want to have $50 million cash flow. And I came back and I told the owners that that's what we were going to do, and they said, don't ever repeat that. Somebody will expect you to do it. You know? And in 3.5 years, we were by $50 million. And here's why. Here's why. Because once you set that destination for people and you encourage them to do it themselves, people will get it done. And you don't know all the answers, providence kicks in, whatever, but it changes the dynamic. And you make people own it and feel responsible for it. One of the other things, though, I wanted to talk about as it relates to leadership is the whole concept of, when I said ethics and authenticity and those things, a lot of times people think you need to, I can cheat a little bit to get ahead. I can cheat a little bit to get ahead. They're doing it. I can do it. If you're not authentic, if you can't look in the mirror every day and understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and you can't articulate that to everybody you work with, you shouldn't be doing it. And you see it over and over. Those of you in the room are probably too young. Some of my colleagues my age remember like Enron, when suddenly people start doing things, not saying I'm going to commit a crime, but they start doing things on the margin to compromise an ethic. And that's usually what it is. It's a very slow, why did God give us nerves in our body? Nerves are a warning sign. The reason you have pain is a warning sign of danger. And what happens too often in organizations or with individuals is you start to have a dulling of your nerve endings, dulling of your ethics. And when you have that dulling of your ethics, you start to take shortcuts. You start to think it's okay to get away with something. You start to think, I'll work this person or this situation. And you lose not only your ethic, but your authenticity. And you cannot be a great leader unless you're truly, truly authentic. Because you may fool people for a while, but they will see through it. There was an old politician from Minnesota who ran for president named Hubert Humphrey, HHH. Some of you may remember that. And he said that as a speaker, you can use all the ain't got no's in the world when you're talking to people, but if you're talking from the heart and you're being real, people will listen to you. They will respect your authenticity. And so again, if you're a leader, I think that notion of authenticity becomes critically important. Two other things I wanted to touch on is, as a leader, never underestimate your impact on people, good or bad. Good or bad. When I talk to, through business, when I would promote somebody or someone would be promoted and I would talk to them, a lot of times when you take on new responsibilities, you feel like, all right, I got to up my game now. I'm in charge of more. And so you got to have a little more bravado. You have a little more presence. You got to speak with a little louder, more authoritative voice. I would argue that it's totally the opposite. It's totally the opposite. Because when you have authority, those stripes you get are magnifiers. They're automatic magnifiers. And use this example. Everyone in this room has had an occasion where somebody who is the professor or the coach or the boss or whatever it is walked by you and didn't have a pleasant look or pleasant something to say. And quickly through your mind you go, what'd I do? What's going on? What's wrong? Or if somebody gives you, a hard time, you take that not just at work, you take it home with you. It's what I call, as being a leader, what's the wake you leave behind you? Because anytime you interact with people, there is a consequence of that interaction. So if you think about a boat going by and the wake behind a boat, as a leader in your interactions with people, whether it's casual in a conversation in the cafeteria or it's standing in front of your entire company, you've got to be cognizant of what it is that you're leaving in that wake. Is it a wake of nourishment and encouragement and direction? Or is it a wake of dissonance and confusion or concern? Because those two differences make all the difference in the world in terms of how people react in their leadership roles or in getting the job done. And it also gives you the authority, it gives you the credibility to be able to inspire people or to be able to tell people the toughest news in the world with a straight face and compassion and have them understand, and not be a victim of that. So that notion of the wake and the authenticity. When you screw with people, and some leaders do, just because they have the power. When you screw with people because you're the leader or you're the one in charge, and you think I'm going to impose, I'm going to show them, I'm going to teach them, there may not be an immediate consequence, but trust me, there are. Somebody once told me years ago, it's like people putting arrows in a quiver. Every time you, can I say this word? Every time you piss somebody off, they put an arrow in the quiver, you know? And you may not see it at once, but as soon as they get a real opportunity, they're going to pull those arrows out and they're going to fire at you. They are going to undermine, they are going to get back at you. True story. I was driving to work one day in St. Louis. Our kids were relatively little. Driving to work, and beautiful morning, and got into the traffic a little bit. I was about 5-10 miles from work, and I put the brake on, and I pulled off the brake, and I felt something in my shoe. I thought, what in the world? And I felt it again. I'm like, oh my God, there's gum on the bottom of my shoe. Don't you hate when that, I mean, you get gum on the bottom of your shoe? That is an annoyance. I got gum on the bottom of my shoe. And then I go a little bit further, and I'm almost to work, and I go, wait a minute, no, that gum is in my shoe. I'm like, how in the world did it get gum in my shoe? I get to work, get out of the car, and I take 2 steps, and all of a sudden I'm going, hell, there's gum in my other shoe. I got gum in both of my shoes. And now I'm like, our oldest son, Ace, I said, you know what? And I called his mother, and I said, I am going to whip that boy when I get home. I don't know what kind of practical joke he was playing or something like that. So all day I'm steaming at work, and I get home, and I get around the dinner table, and I say to Ace, by the way, you and I are going to talk. I said, what were you thinking about? And he's looking at me like, what? And I said, you know what I'm talking about. And sure enough, the little guy, you know, he's like 6 years old, Danny. Son says, I did it. I said, what? He says, I put the gum in your shoe. Holy cow. So I grab him, we go up, so I don't have this conversation in front of the other kids now. I got to understand what's going on. Took him upstairs into our bedroom and our bathroom, sat down on a little bench, and I said, buddy, why in the world did you put gum in my shoes? Oh, because. And I said, what? So you put gum in these shoes because, he says, because you was a jerk. I said, what? Because you was a jerk to me. And I said, so I was a jerk to you? I'm so sorry. What did I do? And he told me, and I said, oh man, I am so sorry. I didn't mean. And I said, so you put gum in these shoes because I was a jerk to you? And he says, I put gum in all your shoes. And sure enough, I went in my closet, and there was maybe 7 pairs of shoes, tennis shoes, topsiders, loafers. He had think about the mind. He sat there, chewed gum, put it up inside the shoe by the ball of the foot on every single shoe. Think of what people will do to get back at you, you know? I've never forgotten that illustration of what people will do to get back at you. Finally, I want to talk about accountability and rewards, because they become really, really important. What motivates people? What motivates you? There are really 2 kinds of rewards that we are all motivated by, the intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. The extrinsic rewards are the paychecks, the cars, the house, those kinds of things. The intrinsic rewards are the things that make us feel really, really good as a human being, and we all know what that is. You all know that. And that is the best feeling you can get, you know, and nobody can take that from you. That's a great reward. And so as you work with people, or as you seek the position you want, and I think Jim was alluding to that earlier, you got to do something you really love, something that actually pays you back. And 99% of the time, it's you doing something for somebody else, or you doing a job well. I heard a speaker once, years and years ago, about 100 years ago. It was out in Utah somewhere at a convention. And this guy was strange. I thought he was strange. And then all of a sudden it went click, it made sense. And his theory or his theme was, people will pay to work harder than they'll work to get paid. Like, what? And he had to repeat it like 4 times. That was a little slow. People will pay to work harder than they'll work to get paid. And he said, think about it. He said, we're on a ski slope here. People are paying a lot of money for equipment and for ski passes and everything else to go up there, and they're working their butt off, you know, skiing down the hill. And he said, are people who pay money to go to a gym, and they're trying to improve their time on the treadmill. They're trying to improve the amount of weight that they're lifting. They're paying money, and they're working really hard. Why? And he said, you know, watch people play tennis. When you see people play tennis and they're warming up, right? Boop, 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 warming up. And then they get to a point where, what does one of them usually say? Ready? Ready for what? Ready to start keeping score. Ready to start keeping score. Ready to see if you can trim or get a little more weight up. Ready to see if you can lose a little more weight, if you could shave a little more time. Things that you'll put great effort in to have a tangible, measurable reward. And so that notion in work, whether it's what you get back, and it isn't always dollars, it's a matter of a sense of improving, that self-actualization, motivation that needs to be there. And you need to think about that with the people. That's why empathy is critical, because everybody you work with is going to be a little bit different in their style of what matters to them, what motivates them. And the better you understand them in this situation, you know how to create, the monetary reward's easy. You know how to create that intrinsic reward. And there's no substitute to people being more rewarded than feeling like they were part of the solution. A couple examples at the Plain Dealer. We had at one point, when I got there, there was a pretty big gap between revenue and expense, and not in a good way. And so I knew that we were going to have to reduce costs, which is never pleasant. But you've got to look at your senior management team, and they're all different styles. We had this one guy, who's a unique guy, very unique guy, ran circulation department. And he was this guy who was so proud of everything he did that you could tell, you don't tell him what to do, because he knows it. He knows how to do it. However, if you make him a hero in solving a problem, now you've got a different story. So it didn't take me long to figure out that with Robert, the issue was, and I could figure there was probably maybe 10, 12, $15 million too much in his budget. But you know, you don't want to go to somebody and say, hey, you got to cut $10 million out of your budget. You know, you've really started a bonding relationship there, right? So you paint the picture of what success looks like. Here's the problem we have, and said to them, you know, look, I would appreciate anybody's helps and your ideas by Monday. If you could get back to me with what you could think. I'm really looking for leadership and creativity here. So with Robert especially, I went back and visited him. He came back that Monday, and he came like singing into my office, like, what's up, Robert? I think I got it. I think I can get us $4 million, maybe 5. I said, Robert, that's fantastic. I said, that's fantastic. I said, just in one weekend? Yep, figured it out. So we go into the meeting, and right before the meeting with the senior team that afternoon, he came back and says, I can get 6. So I'm like, so I dubbed him in front of everybody else. Here's Robert, my $6 million man. If there's a problem to be solved, he can solve it. Fast forward, within a week, it was $10 million. A couple years later, we had yet a bigger issue. We had a $30 million issue. Now, you want to have fun, walk into a meeting and say, look, we got to reduce $30 million. And so I grind at that at night. You just grind at night. You do, before you ever talk to people, if you're the one in charge, you're grinding it, you're trying to figure out, because you want to get back to that point where, what are we doing and why are we doing it? And if you can't answer the question, you ought not do it. And so I decided, all right, I got to face the music with the guys and the ladies, and walked in and said, look, I said, you ever notice how, do people still do Sudoku puzzles, by the way? The students here know what Sudoku puzzles are? All right. I was always fascinating. My wife would do them, and I'd be in an airport or something, and you'd watch people just like intense, right? Trying to figure this out. Intense, trying to figure it out, because the reward was if they figured it out. You know? So I walked in and I said, look, we got an issue. And they looked at me like, what? I said, well, you know how people like to play Sudoku? Yeah. And they like to figure it out? Yeah. I said, we got a $30 million Sudoku puzzle we need to figure out. But it was a different way of framing it, again, and making people be the leaders in solving the issue and getting it worked out. That gave them energy and nourishment to talk to their people, and it gave a tone to talk to their people and their people and their people, so that collectively people weren't victims of being told this. Again, sometimes people say if you're a leader, you know, it's tough because you have to make hard decisions. And if you ever have to, and you're in a position to terminate somebody, have to let them go, that's not a place you like to be. Again, you grind at night. And I had the worst time in my career. All I wanted to do when I was young is be liked by people. That's all I wanted. And wanting to be liked by people, to be popular with people, and being a leader, the two just don't go together. They don't. Because you will artificially not do things a leader would do in order to have people like you. the reality is that like will come with respect. And so if you need to, and we've all had to be there, or you will be in there in your career, this is a tough one. Look at these gentlemen over here, or the ladies back there. You take on a job and the first time you need to let somebody go, you know, the idea is like, well, you got to have a heart, right? You got to have a heart. If you're a leader, you got to have a heart. And I submit to you, over all the years of grinding on this one and always wanting to be liked, I had the aha moment that having a heart and dealing with that tough subject and having to terminate somebody who's not pulling their weight is having a heart. Because if you think about your responsibilities, it's for the entire ship. It's for the entire body. And if you think about the heart, what causes threats to the heart, to the body, is blockage, you know? And so in your organization, or you're dealing with people on your team, on your groups, your study groups, or at work that aren't pulling their weight, and you don't deal with it, you're threatening the whole body. And so if you deal with it, it's kind of like a bypass. You open it up. You get good flow going again. And trust me, everybody around you notices it. And that became, as opposed to wanting and fearing, wanting to be like and fearing people being upset with me, to understanding that I am helping protect the whole body, the whole company, you know, the lifeboat, if you will, by addressing those tough issues and taking them head on. Doing it respectfully, doing it decisively, but doing it for the reasons of the greater good. And it's never lost on other people, and it actually energizes people. It doesn't cause fear. And I'll close with this. Remember I talked about empathy in the very beginning, kind of as the DNA of communication, the DNA of leadership, those things. You never know when you're going to get a lesson. I told a story on my little guy, right? I'll tell one on my big guy. This is about 12 years ago or so in St. Louis, and I was a publisher of the paper there. And I knew that you know, we had about 12 unions, and some of the union contracts were coming up, and it was going to be heavy conflict. It was going to be a heavy conflict. And again, you sort through your mind what you want to do, why you want to do it, and you get to a point where you feel right about it, or you don't pursue it. And I'd gotten to that point where I felt, here's what the company needs in order to survive and thrive out of these next union contracts. And so we began the process, and it became very ugly very quickly. And there were billboards, major billboards going on every freeway into downtown St. Louis with my phone number on it saying Union Buster. And there were other things. And so as I knew that was coming, I, again, at our little dinner table, my wife, daughter, and 2 sons, and sitting there, and I said, you know, I told my wife, I got to tell them about this, because they're going to hear their dad's name in pretty bad ways out in the community, and I want them to know that. So there I sat at the table, passionately trying to tell them, here's what we're doing, here's why, with all of my conviction as to why I was right. And of course, the little one, he didn't care. My daughter's, you know, my wife's, you know, trying to be supportive. And I finished with this passionate expression of why we're doing what we're doing, and why Dad's right. And I said, you guys get it? And I said, I really wanted you to know that and understand that. And our oldest son, Ace, he was 9th grade at the time, maybe 10th. He said, you know, Dad, I love you. He says, and thanks for sharing that. He says, but before I can make up my mind finally, he says, I have to ask myself, and I have to think about, what's the union guy telling his family at the dinner table tonight? Very, very, very profound. And the power of trying to get out of your own, because I was totally in my shoes. I was totally in my world. And I was totally right with it and comfortable with it. And there, my son at the dinner table opened my aperture dramatically to say, if I'm going to be a good leader in this situation, I have to be thinking about what he's telling his kids at the dinner table too. So, thank you very much.